Hi everybody, this is your Digital Super Saiyan 3 back with another video. And today I finally am gonna do this video. I should have done this back in the month of January, and it is my top 10 episodes of Monday Night Raw, picking my favorite episodes of Raw out of the many years of Raw. Now I should have done this back in January during the 25th anniversary of Raw, but I just been procrastinating a lot, and I've been too busy, so I'm gonna finally do this. I'm picking 10 of my favorites. And if you don't have a favorite that's not on this list, I'm sorry, but I will do a sequel eventually to this list in the near future, but this is my top 10 best episodes of Monday Night Raw. At number 10 is the July 1st, 2002 episode of Monday Night Raw. This episode, the July 1st, 2002 episode, centers around a main event for the WWE Undisputed Championship that was contested in a ladder match between champion Undertaker and challenger Jeff Hardy. And believe it or not, Jeff Hardy said that this was his favorite match of all time, and hard not to deny that this match centered around Jeff Hardy competing against The Undertaker for a chance to win the Undisputed Championship. Even though Jeff didn't win the Undisputed Championship that night on Raw, he still won the respect of The Undertaker, and Undertaker beat Jeff Hardy down. After beating Jeff in the ladder match, Taker proceeded to beat Jeff Hardy. He came back, and then Jeff Hardy says, "What more can you do to me?" And that uttered the respect of The Undertaker. And the stuff with Jeff and Undertaker on this episode of Raw was great. But what other stuff happened? Well, you had an opening match between Brock Lesnar and Ric Flair. Basically, Brock Lesnar making a challenge to any veteran in the back that would be willing to take him on. Let alone and behold, out comes Ric Flair saying that you cost me ownership of Raw, I want revenge, and they have a match. And quite honestly, despite the Nature Boy's best efforts, he is not able to take out Brock Lesnar. And of course, you have a match between Rob Van Dam and William Regal. The weak points of this episode of Raw, that why it's only number 10, simple. You had stuff like Bradshaw versus frickin' Christopher Nowinski, and Nowinski saying, "I don't want to wrestle for the Hardcore Championship." So the Hardcore Championship at this point, this was the last year we ever saw the Hardcore Championship. I mean, as we were going into SummerSlam, the Hardcore Championship gets killed off, it gets absorbed by the Intercontinental Championship, and we never see the Hardcore Championship again. So, yeah. And there was also this bullshit brawl between Jackie Gata and Molly Holly. I love Molly Holly, but she should not have had to waste her time with Jackie Gata. Next up at number 9, we got the May 29th, 2000 episode. The May 29th, 2000 episode of Raw. They were in Vancouver. They were in Canada. And on this show, you had the misadventures of frickin' Josie, the backup singer of Kid Rock, and the stuff he gets into with Edge and Christian on this episode of Raw was hilarious. The stuff Edge and Christian call him Mini-Me, and then Josie does not take too kindly, and he ends up costing Edge and Christian the tag team titles against Too Cool. Brian Christopher, you will be missed. I miss Brian Christopher. I love Grandmaster Sexay, to be honest. I really wish he was still with us. But Too Cool ends up winning the tag team titles. But also on this show, you had a main event made between The Rock and Undertaker. Undertaker came back at Judgment Day 2000 and basically cost The Rock the WWF Championship in the main event Iron Man match for the WWF title between Undertaker and Rock. And, well, Undertaker came back on the opening segment of this show. He previously was involved in last week's Raw. and he helped The Rock out. Now this time, Rock and Undertaker are forced to face off against each other in the main event by order of Mr. McMahon. However, McMahon begins to continue to stack the odds against them as soon as we learn someone has been attacking the regime, left and right. And let alone and behold, the regime was attacked by Kane. First, Kane attacked Road Dogg, then he attacked Briscoe, and then he attacked Vince. And of course, Rock and Undertaker are forced into a lumberjack match, and the match doesn't even start. They just fight off the entirety of the regime. Then the regime starts to beat down Undertaker and Rock. Then Kane comes out. Then Rock, Undertaker, and Kane all stand in the middle of the ring. Kane holds up the WWF Championship, and a great ending to this episode. Number 8 is the August 9th, 1999 episode of Raw. August 9th, 1999, Raw is Jericho. This was the episode where Chris Jericho made his WWF debut, and this episode is famous for that. And we also had the return of Jesse the Body Ventura on commentary, and Jesse the Body Ventura making his long-awaited return to the WWF. No one has seen Jesse the Body Ventura in the WWF since, well, in a long time, since, he later went to WCW, and then later on he left and he went into politics. And the governor of Minnesota was announced that he was the special guest referee in the WWF title match between Triple H and Stone Cold Steve Austin. However, plans for this episode of Raw began to change. As originally, Triple H was supposed to compete in a triple threat match with with Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Undertaker. However, because Austin was found unconscious, the triple threat match was made into a #1 contenders match between Triple H, Chyna, and The Undertaker. And Triple H is like, I don't want to fight Chyna, and Chyna's like, try me, Triple H. And Triple H calls her a quote-unquote bitch. And the triple threat match was really good on this show. Also, we had that infamous moment where The Rock was cutting a promo on the Big Show, and he faces off with Big Show, but he had the moment where he was interrupted by Jericho. This episode of Raw was just great. Next up is, at the number 7 spot, the October 5th, 1998 episode, Calling Dr. Austin. Basically the only 1998 episode of Raw on this list. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate 1998 Raw. I basically will do a list of the best episodes of 1998 Raw when I think about doing it. But this is my favorite from 1998. Basically, Vince McMahon, the previous week on Raw, during the Zamboni episode, at the end of the Zamboni episode, had his foot crushed by The Undertaker and Kane. So Vince McMahon was in the hospital recuperating, and basically, this entire episode of Raw was centered around Vince McMahon recuperating in a hospital. And we got to see Mankind come in, and he's quote-unquote there to try to cheer Vince up, and Vince tells him to leave. Then we later cut to Austin, disguised as a doctor, and he beats the shit out of Vince. It's such a good episode. It's like my favorite episode from 1998, from the 1998 era of Raw. Definitely gotta say this was my favorite episode of Raw in 1998. Next up at number 6, we get another episode from 1999. We got the June 14th, 1999 episode, CEO 316. June 14th, 1999 was such a hilarious episode of Raw. The previous week on Raw, Vince McMahon was unmasked as the higher power who leads the corporate ministry. And of course, well, Stephanie and Linda, who were put through hell because of the ministry and the antics of what they have been doing, decide to get back at Vince by naming Stone Cold Steve Austin as the new CEO. And basically the week following this, Austin spends the entirety of this episode at the WWF headquarters, basically, quote-unquote, basically running things by having the board of directors having a beer drinking contest, basically having, well, the salaries, messing with the salaries. We even see Stone Cold Steve Austin, quote-unquote, put cow manure in Vince's office. Basically because he said, I've been standing in bullshit all day, so I might as well be, quote-unquote, make sure that your office is full of it. And Austin, to insult to injury, pours beer on it. So, Vince announces that the match that he's chosen to face Austin in, that he and his son Shane would face Austin in at the 1999 King of the Ring, would be a ladder match with ownership of the WWF hanging above the ring. If Stone Cold Steve Austin could grab it all, then he gets all the power. Basically, it's Vince and Shane versus Austin in a ladder match. But also, what gets made for the 1999 King of the Ring, we get The Rock getting an opportunity to compete for the WWF Championship when he defeats The Undertaker and Triple H in the main event. It's a great episode. The June 14th episode, I say, is a great episode, whether it be hilarious, and we see a lot of stipulations be thrown into play, like we see Ken Shamrock compete in a straitjacket. We see Test compete with a blindfold on. It's just an awesome episode. Next up is the February 7th, 2000 episode from February 7th. And that is the 10-man tag war. Basically, this is known for having the best 10-man tag in the history of Monday Night Raw. You had the babyface team of The Rock, Cactus Jack, and Too Cool with Rikishi, Scotty 2 Hotty, and Grandmaster Sexay taking on the team of Chris Benoit, Triple H, X-Pac, Perry Saturn, and Dean Malenko in a great 10-man tag main event. This main event was crazy. It was awesome. It was basically the best part about it. Like, the entirety of this episode was surrounding the hype for this main event. They were in Dallas, Texas. It was a great match and a great show. Oh, and we also had the Acolytes versus the Hollies in a hardcore match. We saw Viscera taking on Chris Jericho, and Kurt Angle even cut a promo on Mark Henry and even faced Mark Henry defending the European title. Still, it's an amazing show nonetheless. Next up at number 4 is the February 21st, 2005 episode. And this is centering around Batista's face turn, basically deciding which brand is Batista going to be on. This follows up the 2005 edition of No Way Out, which was a SmackDown show. But Batista, who was at No Way Out last night, made waves. Now it determines which brand is Batista going to be on. Is he going to stay on Raw and face Triple H for the World Heavyweight Championship, or is he going to go to SmackDown? Well, Batista makes up his mind, and he does it in the most theoretically possible way. He powerbombs Triple H and takes out Ric Flair and signs to go to Raw, because he learned that a previous week on Raw, Triple H orchestrated a hit and run, framing JBL basically for the hit and run, just to make sure Batista would get scared straight. After overhearing Triple H's plan, Batista, well, decides to rebel. It's a great episode nonetheless. Number 3 is the May 21st, 2001 episode, Fall of the Two-Man Power Trip. You have the corporate cronies of Stone Cold Steve Austin and Triple H, who joined the corporation. Or shall I say Stone Cold Steve Austin, who's the heel WWF champion, who turned heel at WrestleMania 17 and joined Vince McMahon. We see Austin and Triple H won the tag team titles off of The Undertaker and Kane at Backlash, and they continued to dominate the tag team division. However, last night at Judgment Day, Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit earned an opportunity to compete for the tag team titles, and they did so by winning Tag Team Turmoil. And so, That night, the following night on Raw, they faced Triple H at Austin in an awesome main event. We also see Kurt Angle attempt to reenact his Olympic gold medal ceremony. It's a great episode of Raw that I hope will be enjoyed by many to come. Especially since this was the Raw where Triple H tore his quads. It was still a great episode, and it had a great tag team main event. And also, the stuff with Kurt Angle and Shane McMahon was great. You should give the May 21st episode a watch. Next up is, at the number 2 spot, is the March 22nd, 1999 episode, The Corporate Beer Bath. It was a great episode. Basically, this was the go-home for WrestleMania 15. This was centering around a main event between Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Big Show. And The Rock would have a match with Mankind to determine who would main event the main event between Stone Cold and The Big Show. And all hell does break loose in this. We had JR, who was at a frat house watching the event. Hardcore Holly went to the frat house JR was at. He was having a brawl with Dr. Death, Steve Williams. It's an awesome episode nonetheless. This episode's segment had the most memorable segment in all of Raw history. The opening with the corporate beer bath was awesome. Shane later challenges X-Pac to a Greenwich street fight. It's an awesome episode. But my number 1 episode is the March 26, 2001 episode. Shane owns WCW. I put this one at number 1. Basically, Shane McMahon bought the rights to WCW from out from underneath his father's nose. And this basically was the go-home for WrestleMania 17. Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit face each other, basically have a huge exchange, which leads up to a match at WrestleMania between Benoit and Angle. This entire episode was great. Like, Vince McMahon's night of triumph turns into a night of hell for him. Like, especially when he learns that Mick Foley even becomes the special guest referee in his street fight with Shane at WrestleMania. Basically, we even see a tag team match between Rock and Austin, who were opponents at WrestleMania, taking on Undertaker and Kane. It's a great episode nonetheless, and I think you should check it out. This has been your Digital Super Saiyan 3, and I'll see you next time.